you, and I want to thank...
That's one way to do it. Stand there and play.
Okay, I want to thank the organisers for having me here, and I also want to thank everyone for turning up. Now, what did I want to say? I did the same. I wrote that 10 times, and I've still got, I got version 9 here. I was just reading for hello, version 10 is still sitting on the desk at home. But anyway, I think what we have to do, what I'd like to do is just remember that this legislation came about due to an unimaginable tragedy. And our thoughts and condolences go to the family that were involved in that tragedy. Now, the government does have a responsibility to deal with things that arise from tragedies like that, but they also have a responsibility not only to the victim of the tragedy, but the immediate family, the friends, the relatives, but more importantly, the community as a whole. And when governments respond to things like that, they need to do it with careful consideration. They need to research it in order to get their response right. In this particular case, I think we would be kind to the government to say that their reaction was swift. It was actually lightning fast. That to me suggests it hasn't been well considered, hasn't been researched well, and as a result we've got a flawed, unworkable piece of legislation. If there's going to be any legacy from that tragedy, we must go back to the drawing board, review this legislation and arrive at a far more appropriate response. I stand here wearing a number of hats. First and foremost, I'm a parent. I understand what it's like. Or I don't understand. I can only imagine what it's like to have a child injured in any situation. I'm a husband. I'm a successful business person, or was until I lost my job as a result of attending a VCAT case instead of an ACCC case. But I'm also a member of the community. The main reason I was asked to speak here today is because I have been a Staffordshire Bull Terrier breeder for 32 years. I'm a licensed terrier dog judge specialising in terrier bull breeds. I've had experience judging purebred American Pit Bull Terriers in the US under the UKC standard. I've been involved in 5 VCAT cases so far, on restricted breed dog cases. One of those I was the advocate, and Kathy, you were right, I did get 100 objections in cross-examination. The others I was there as an expert witness. So in preparing what I wanted to say today, I actually applied my parent, husband, business person, community hat, as well as the others in trying to work out what I was going to say. So it's my belief that all members of the community want their governments to enact legislation that's well considered and well researched. When the government sat down to consider this legislation, the option of going down breed-specific legislation was always going to be available to them, and some would suggest this might have been the most attractive option also. However, in assessing this option, they had available to them a wealth of material available to consider from other jurisdictions. As we all know, breed-specific legislation exists in a number of places in the world, and therefore there were many number of case studies available to be researched and considered. Again, if we reflect on the speed of enacting, we would have to only draw 2 conclusions. Number one is BSL was probably the only option they actually had on the table, and didn't consider anything else, and no meaningful effort of any kind was done to try and research the case studies that were available to them. If they'd done that research, they probably would have found out 4 things. BSL around the world differs in its form from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and there really is no consistent standard model of BSL. But the one thing that is consistent about BSL is that it consistently causes the wrong dogs to be identified. The other thing that's consistent about BSL around the world is that it's totally ineffective because phenotype has never been and never will be an indicator of a dangerous dog. BSL in other jurisdictions is being wound back because it's been found through experience to be ineffective in dealing with the issues that was introduced for, and our government didn't even bother to look at that. Dog attacks, however severe or minor, are a serious matter and we all should worry about them. Going back a few years, I'm not a young man, unfortunately. Early in my working career, I was actually employed by a government agency. Part of my job was to do process serving. Obviously, this saw me visiting the homes of people who found themselves on the wrong side of the law, And the nature of the job was that it necessarily involved encounters with dogs that took their job of protecting their territory and their owners quite seriously. Nevertheless, I had a job to do, and I attempted to do it to the best of my ability, and being a dog person, I was able to overcome these encounters on many occasions. However, in that particular role, I was bitten a couple of times, but not one of those bites came from a dog that was of a particular phenotype. They came from a range of phenotypes: big, medium-sized, small, smooth coat, fluffy coat, you name it. I saw aggression while doing this job in all types of dogs. And the only two bites I encountered was one from a Chihuahua who took exception to my Achilles tendon. And the other one was from a Shih Tzu Maltese cross who probably still has my shoe for the style as a event of the occasion. Having been around dogs and dog shows for a large portion of life, I've witnessed dog bites in that environment too. Personally, I was once bitten on the arse by a Pharaoh hound that took 10 stitches to sew up. As a dog steward, I've witnessed judges being bitten by a Golden Retriever, a Skye Terrier, a Jack Russell, and even a Dachshund. So it's very clear through my own experiences that phenotype gives no indication whatsoever of the propensity for a dog to be dangerous or bite a human being. I mentioned before that I've judged purebred pit bull terriers. I've judged 165 of them, in fact. And those dogs, all 165 of them, without exception, were amongst the most approachable dogs I've ever had my hands on as a dog judge, and I've judged over 3,000 dogs. Now, just imagine for a moment what happens in a dog show. The judge has got 90 seconds to do a thorough physical examination of the dog. That involves opening their mouth, sticking your fingers inside to make the dentitions fine, opening their eyes to make sure the eye colour and eye shape is correct. There's probably nothing that can be more intimidating for a dog than a total stranger walking up and doing that to a dog. At that particular show where I judged pit bulls, not one single dog shied away. In fact, a lot of them actually wagged their tails. There is nothing wrong with a well-natured bull breed dog, including purebred American Pit Bull Terriers. The standard the Victoria government's introduced for what they call an American Pit Bull Terrier seems to be principally based around that standard that I judged under in the United States. However, there are two essential problems that lie at the root of assessing dogs against any standard, any dog against any standard. Number one, it is an entirely subjective process. And number two, most standards, including this one that we're talking about today, provide a wide range of variants for animals that will actually fit into it. And that's specifically why licensed dog judges like myself go through very extensive training that extends over a couple of years of theory to ensure they're familiar with the subtle nuances that fit with the standard and the true type of dog that the standard is trying to depict. It's only when a judge can demonstrate through theoretical and practical exams that they understand this that they're given a license to judge. Even then, they continue to learn and refine their eye for the correct type of dog under a particular standard. 3 weeks ago, I judged a dog show in Johannesburg in South Africa, and I saw a particular breed for the first time there. That was another learning exercise for me as a dog judge. Now, consider the dog rangers. And actually, I think these guys have had something passed to them that they really don't like. It's my opinion that most of them are pretty well-meaning in what they're doing. Some aren't, but most are. On passing this legislation, the government handed them a massive burden. A standard was thrust into their hands with essentially no training, and they were told to go out and find dogs that fit the standard and bring them back to be euthanized. I can hardly imagine a more inept way to go about this, as it takes many years of training and learning for a licensed dog judge to be competent, so how could these people be competent?
Yes.
It's of absolutely no surprise to me that as a result of the approach taken, we're now seeing through the various VCAT cases that well-natured family pets are being brought in to be incarcerated for long periods of time on death row, while their families spend thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of worrying just trying to defend their family pet. In short, the dogs ending up in the VCAT cases are not the dogs the legislation really should be aimed at. The dogs the legislation should be aimed at to deal with are those that truly represent a danger to community, and that cannot be determined by phenotype. The dangerous and menacing dog descriptions in the domestic are well-intentioned, head down that correct path to some extent. However, again, the coroner, I believe, in the Chol case got it right when speaking of irresponsible owners. And that's where the government should be directing its focus. Put quite simply, a bad owner can make a dog of any breed or any mix of breeds a dangerous dog, just as a hoon driver is a threat to the community on the roads. I would have liked to have spoken about two cases that I'm involved in at VCAT today, but I can't speak about either of them too much. One, VCAT upheld the declaration. It is on appeal at the Supreme Court, so I can't say too much about that one. But what I can say is the enduring vision I have of the dog involved in that is the picture of the dog curled up on its couch at home with its Jack Russell mate and one of the owner's children. Clearly, this dog is guilty of only one thing: being a loving and well-natured family member. And I hope it goes well for you, Arthur. In the other, VCAT actually overturned the restricted declaration, so we had a win, and the dog was declared when it was only a few months old, and it was incarcerated when it was only a puppy. But it still, to this day, sits down at North Melbourne, locked up, because it's got a pending dangerous dog incident over its head, which allegedly occurred when the dog was a 3-month-old puppy. The enduring image I have of this dog is her friendly and soft-natured disposition when I went to assess her. In fact, that night I said to my wife and family that I could have easily brought her home, such was her nature and disposition. But then the council would have been after me. But there's other cases coming before VCAT that clearly highlight this legislation simply doesn't work. Like the therapy dog that has been trained to assist its owner when she has epileptic fits. Like the unpapered purebred Stafford Gibble Terrier that happened to be a liver colour. Yes, Staffords do come in liver, it's rare, and when they're liver, they've got a brown nose. And the ranger put this purebred Stafford Gibble Terrier into the pound simply because it had a brown nose. So this dog is now going through the legal process, but I believe the case was won, actually. Is that correct? That was a recent one. Anyway, can't think of the dog's name off the top of my head. One thing that has been highlighted to me through the VCAT cases I've been involved in is there's only one winner coming out of this legislation, and that's barristers representing the councils. Yep. In fact, on standard barrister rates today, there's one council I can think of that must have spent upwards of $100,000 so far in legal fees, and that particular council has lost most of its cases. Now, if I was a ratepayer in that council, which happily I'm not, I'd be very concerned about the way they're wasting ratepayers' monies to take other residents of the council through the court system. And I think it's rather ironic that this is the weekend for council elections, and I wonder whether the elected members of that particular council were held to account for this type of expenditure. Then we have the situation where council rangers now are doing countless hours of paperwork in preparation for hearings and spending days at a time. Their frustration is evident. And in one recent case, it all became too much when Bonnie was cross-examining the ranger. He basically threw his hands in the air and said, "You win." So these people are clearly under pressure as well. Question 35, wasn't it, Bonnie? Question 35 did it. I said earlier that the government had a responsibility to get their response right to community issues. In this case, the response was swift, not carefully considered, not well researched, and as a result the response is clearly flawed and not right. I also said earlier, if the legacy of AN's tragedy is to have a meaningful and effective outcome, the government must go back to the drawing board and review this legislation and arrive at a far more appropriate response to the problems involved. The time for the government to do this is now, not later, and the minister keeps saying, "Oh, we've got it under review." Yeah, well, we know what happens when ministers have things under review. It means they're in the too hard basket. And a good starting point for the government would be for them to look at the suggestions recently put forward by the AVA, along with carefully examine the many case studies they've got available to them about BSL around the world. Thanks very much.